Human mechanic bought old alien ship for $5, then found Earth's lost colony coordinates hidden inside. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. In the dusty outskirts of New Phoenix Spaceport, Blake Turner wiped sweat from his brow as he surveyed the alien spacecraft graveyard stretching before him, never imagining that his life was about to change forever. Blake's weathered boots kicked up clouds of rust-colored dust as he navigated through the jumbled maze of discarded spacecraft. The summer heat bore down mercilessly on the spacecraft graveyard, the largest in the Sol system, where decommissioned vessels from a dozen different species came to die. His trained mechanics scanned the wreckage, looking for salvageable parts that might fetch a decent price. Times were tough on Earth in 2287, especially for independent mechanics trying to compete with the megacorporations that dominated the industry. "Turner, you're wasting your time here today," called Sal, the graveyard supervisor, a heavy-set man with perpetually grease-stained overalls. "Nothing good came in this week. Just junk the Galactic Alliance didn't even think was worth recycling." Blake waved acknowledgement but continued his search. At 34, he had developed a reputation for finding value where others saw only garbage. His small repair shop on the edge of New Phoenix struggled to stay afloat, but he refused to give up his independence and join one of the corporate operations that offered standardized repair services with little creativity or passion. "I'll be the judge of what's junk," Blake muttered to himself, squinting against the glare reflecting off a twisted piece of hull plating. He had almost given up when he spotted it, a small vessel partially covered by a tarp, tucked behind a massive derelict Centaurian cargo hauler. The ship was unlike anything Blake had seen before. It was roughly oval-shaped with an asymmetrical cockpit and strange, organic-looking protrusions that might have been either weapons or sensors. The hull was a dull copper color with faint iridescent patterns that shifted when viewed from different angles. Blake circled the vessel cautiously. It was small, maybe 30 feet long at most, clearly designed for a single pilot or perhaps a pair. There were no visible manufacturer marks, no registration numbers, nothing that identified its species of origin. That alone was unusual. All ships in Galactic Alliance space were required to bear identification. "Hey, Sal," Blake called out. "What's the story with this one?" Sal trudged over, wiping his hands on a rag. "That thing showed up with a batch of Taurian scrap. Nobody knows what it is. Won't power up, no conventional fuel cells or engine parts we could identify. The Alliance inspectors cleared it for salvage after confirming it had no weapons signatures or biohazards." "How much?" Blake asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite his growing excitement. Sal shrugged. "Take it for 5 credits. I need the space, and nobody else has shown any interest. It's probably some failed prototype that never made it to production." Blake tried not to look too eager as he transferred the credits from his worn chip. 5 credits. Less than the cost of lunch at the spaceport canteen for a ship, even a non-functioning one. He knew he might be wasting his money, but something about the vessel called to him. 3 hours and considerable negotiation with a hauler later, Blake had the mysterious ship delivered to his workshop on the outskirts of New Phoenix. The place wasn't much, a converted warehouse with living quarters in the back, cluttered with parts and tools, but it was his, free and clear, inherited from his father who had taught him everything he knew about mechanical engineering. As twilight descended, Blake circled the ship in his workshop, running his hands along its smooth hull. The material felt almost warm to the touch, not like metal at all, more like some kind of ceramic or composite. He found what appeared to be a hatch, but no obvious way to open it. No control panel, no physical latch or handle. "What are you?" he murmured, tapping the hull lightly with a wrench. To his surprise, the sound was not the dull thunk of metal but a resonant tone, almost musical. Blake spent the next 3 days examining every inch of the vessel, taking measurements and notes. He tried various scanning tools from his workshop, but the results were inconsistent. Some showed nothing at all, as if the scanner's beams passed right through the ship, while others displayed readings that made no sense. energy patterns that fluctuated without any discernible cause. On the fourth morning, Blake woke early, frustrated by his lack of progress. He'd skipped dinner the night before, too engrossed in his examination of a series of almost invisible symbols he discovered along one side of the ship. They weren't in any alien language he recognized, and through his work at the spaceport, he'd become passingly familiar with most of the common ones. He made himself a strong cup of coffee and approached the ship again, this time with a different mindset. "I've been thinking about this all wrong," he said aloud. "I've been treating you like a machine, but you're something else entirely, aren't you?" Blake placed his palm flat against the hull near where he'd found the symbols. To his astonishment, the material beneath his hand pulsed once, very subtly, as if acknowledging his touch. A faint line of blue light traced along the edge of what he'd identified as the entry hatch. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered. Blake pressed more firmly, and the light intensified. With a soft hiss, the hatch slid open, revealing a dark interior. Hesitating only briefly, Blake grabbed his portable light and climbed inside. The interior was cramped but oddly comfortable, with surfaces that seemed to shift slightly to accommodate his human form. The cockpit had no conventional controls, no stick, no throttle, no buttons or switches. Instead, there was a single curved seat facing a blank wall. Above the seat hung what looked like a helmet or headpiece constructed of the same material as the ship's hull. A neural interface, Blake realized. It was technology he'd heard about but never seen. Direct mind-to-machine connection, rumored to be in development by the most advanced species in the Galactic Alliance, but considered mostly theoretical. Cautiously, Blake sat in the seat. It adjusted to his body immediately, more comfortable than any chair he'd ever experienced. He reached up and carefully lifted the helmet-like device, examining it before slowly lowering it onto his head. Nothing happened for several seconds. Blake was about to remove the helmet when a flood of images suddenly filled his mind. Stars, planets, nebulae rushing past at incredible speed. He gasped, instinctively gripping the sides of the seat as the sensation of movement overwhelmed him. Then, as quickly as it began, the rush of images stopped, replaced by a single, steady view. A planet, blue and green and beautiful, orbiting a yellow sun much like Earth's, but the continents were all wrong. This wasn't Earth, yet somehow Blake felt a profound sense of familiarity. Words appeared in his mind, not in English or any human language, but somehow he understood. Catha Prime. Home. Return. The vision faded, leaving Blake disoriented and breathing heavily. He removed the helmet with shaking hands, then scrambled out of the ship, needing fresh air and space to process what had just happened. Back in his living quarters, Blake paced the floor, trying to make sense of his experience. Catha Prime. The name meant nothing to him, but the image of that planet was burned into his memory. It had felt important, urgent even, like a message specifically for him. Blake spent the rest of the day searching through public databases for any mention of Catha Prime. He found nothing. Not a single reference in any Galactic Alliance star charts or planetary directories. Either the planet was completely unknown to the Alliance, or its existence was classified. As night fell, Blake's small communications terminal chimed. The ID showed it was Emily Parker, one of the few friends he'd made since moving to New Phoenix 2 years ago. Emily worked as a data analyst for the Earth government's Interstellar Relations Department, and they'd met when she brought her vintage ground car to his shop for repairs. "Blake, I've been trying to reach you for days." Emily's face appeared on the screen, her dark hair pulled back in its usual practical style. "Did you fall into an engine well, or something?" "Sorry, I've been wrapped up in a project," Blake said, deciding on impulse not to mention the ship yet. "What's up?" "Just checking if we're still on for the Founders' Day celebration tomorrow night. The whole department's going, and I promised you'd come this year." Blake had completely forgotten about the annual holiday that commemorated the establishment of Earth's first extrasolar colony almost a century ago. Normally, he avoided such official functions, but he'd promised Emily weeks ago. "Right? Yes, still on," Blake said, an idea forming. Hey, M, quick question. In your work, do you ever come across mentions of planets outside the official Galactic Alliance registries? Emily's expression shifted subtly. That's an odd question. Why do you ask? Just curious. I overheard some traders at the port talking about a place called Catha Prime. Sounded interesting. Emily was silent for a long moment. Blake, I've never heard of any planet by that name, and I have level 3 clearance for the planetary database. Her voice had grown cautious. Where exactly did you hear this? Like I said, just some random conversation. Probably nothing. Blake backpedaled, sensing her unease. So, tomorrow night, right? I'll pick you up at 7. After ending the call, Blake sat in silence, thinking. Emily's reaction had confirmed his suspicion that there was something unusual about Catha Prime. Her security clearance would give her access to all but the most classified information about known worlds. Blake returned to the ship, determined to learn more. This time, when he placed the neural interface on his head, he concentrated, trying to communicate with whatever intelligence guided the vessel. Show me more about Catha Prime, he thought. The response was immediate. A stream of information flowed into his mind, not just images but sensations, emotions, knowledge transferring directly to his consciousness. Blake saw a flourishing colony, humans and a few aliens living together on the lush world. He saw massive engineering projects, gleaming cities rising from virgin forests, a society that seemed to blend advanced technology with environmental harmony. Then the images darkened. Warnings, sirens, people rushing to evacuation ships. A threat approaching, massive vessels belonging to a species Blake didn't recognize. The images became fragmented, chaotic. Violence, destruction, a desperate plan to hide the colony's existence from someone or something. The final image was crystal clear, a star chart, showing the exact location of Catha Prime relative to Earth. The coordinates burned themselves into Blake's memory just before the connection abruptly terminated, leaving him gasping and disoriented once more. When Blake removed the helmet, he noticed something had changed in the ship's interior. A small compartment had opened in the wall beside the pilot's seat, revealing what looked like a data crystal, similar to those used for secure information storage, but of a design he'd never seen before. Blake carefully removed the crystal and examined it. Unlike standard data storage devices, this one seemed to glow with an inner light that pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. He had nothing in his workshop that could interface with such technology, but he knew someone who might. Nathan Brooks had been 3 years ahead of Blake at the Technical Academy and now ran a small but sophisticated tech shop that specialized in cross-species technology adaptation. If anyone could help Blake access the data crystal, it would be Nathan. The next morning, Blake secured his workshop and headed into the heart of New Phoenix with the crystal carefully wrapped in a static-proof cloth. The city had grown exponentially since the establishment of the spaceport, a chaotic blend of Earth architecture and alien influences. Massive skyscrapers towered over streets crowded with humans and non-humans alike. Taurians with their 4 arms gesticulating as they bargained in the markets. Serpentine draconians slithering efficiently through the crowd. Bulky Havorians lumbering along with characteristic patience. Nathan's shop was tucked away in Tech Alley, a narrow street famous for its concentration of specialized technology vendors. The sign simply read, Brooks Integration, in both English and Standard Galactic. Turner, you old rust bucket. Nathan greeted him with a grin, his lanky frame bent over a disassembled alien device. What brings you to my humble establishment? Finally admitting my tech skills surpass your mechanical prowess. Blake rolled his eyes but smiled. Need your help with something, Nate. And it needs to stay between us. Nathan's expression grew serious. He gestured to the back room, away from the few customers browsing his shop. Once they were alone, Blake unwrapped the crystal. Nathan whistled softly. Where did you get this? This isn't Alliance tech or any commercial system I recognize. That's part of what I need to find out, Blake said. Can you read it? Nathan examined the crystal from all angles, then placed it on a scanner. He frowned at the readings. This is well beyond current technology, Blake. The energy signature alone is like nothing I've ever seen. He looked up sharply. Is this related to that derelict ship you hauled to your workshop? Word gets around, you know. Maybe, Blake admitted. What can you tell me about it? Nathan worked for nearly an hour, connecting the crystal to various devices, muttering to himself as each attempt failed to access its contents. Finally, he sat back, frustrated. I can't crack it, at least not with my current equipment. But I can tell you this, it's putting out quantum-level entanglement signatures. Theoretical stuff, Blake. The kind of technology that would let you communicate instantaneously across any distance, regardless of relativity constraints. What about the ship itself? Could you help me understand its systems better? Nathan shook his head. Not without seeing it, and even then, I'm not sure. If it's as advanced as this crystal suggests, we're talking about technology centuries beyond Galactic Alliance standards. He leaned forward. Blake, whatever you've stumbled onto could be extremely valuable or extremely dangerous. Either way, it's going to attract attention. I need to keep it quiet until I understand what I'm dealing with, Blake said. Can I count on you? You know you can, Nathan assured him. But be careful. If this is as advanced as I think it is, there are entities, both governmental and private, who would go to extreme lengths to acquire it. Blake tucked the crystal away. Thanks, Nate. I owe you one. You owe me several, but who's counting? Nathan grinned. And Blake? I want the full story eventually. Blake left the shop with more questions than answers, but with a growing determination to uncover the truth about the ship and Katha Prime. The crystal's apparent communication capabilities particularly intrigued him. If it could indeed facilitate instantaneous communication across interstellar distances, it would revolutionize space travel and commerce. As he made his way back through the crowded streets, Blake couldn't shake the feeling he was being watched. Twice he stopped abruptly, turning to scan the crowd, but saw nothing obviously suspicious. Still, years of dealing with corporate spies trying to steal innovative repair techniques had honed his paranoia to a fine edge. Taking a circuitous route back to his workshop, Blake finally convinced himself he was being overly cautious. He arrived with enough time to shower and change for the Founders' Day celebration before picking up Emily as promised. The celebration was held in the Grand Hall of the Planetary Administration Building, a massive structure of glass and steel that dominated the New Phoenix skyline. Blake felt distinctly out of place among the government officials and corporate executives in their formal attire, despite his best suit, rarely worn and slightly out of fashion. You clean up surprisingly well, Emily teased as they sipped drinks at the edge of the crowded reception. She looked elegant in a simple dark blue dress, her government identification badge the only indication of her professional role. Don't get used to it, Blake replied with a smile. So, these are the movers and shakers of Earth's interstellar policy. Emily nodded, discreetly pointing out various dignitaries. The woman in red is Undersecretary Chan, directly responsible for colonial affairs. The Taurian ambassador is by the eastern windows, and that's Director Harrington of Planetary Security headed this way. Blake turned to see a tall, imposing man with silver hair and a military bearing approaching them. There was something in his sharp gaze that immediately put Blake on edge. Emily, the director nodded cordially. Enjoying the festivities? Yes, sir, Emily replied. May I introduce Blake Turner, a friend from outside the department. Harrington's penetrating gaze fixed on Blake. Turner, what line of work are you in, Mr. Turner? I'm a mechanic, Blake said. I specialize in cross-species vehicle and equipment repair. Interesting, Harrington said, though his tone suggested he found it anything but. And how did you and Ms. Parker become acquainted? I fixed her ground car, Blake replied, maintaining eye contact despite his discomfort. The vintage Miyamoto model. Beautiful machine, just needed some specialized attention. Indeed, Harrington said. Well, enjoy the celebration. The founder's legacy is something we all must strive to uphold and protect. With a curt nod, he moved on to another group. Is he always that intense? Blake asked quietly. Director Harrington takes planetary security very seriously, Emily replied. Especially anything related to colonial matters. The mention of colonies brought Blake's thoughts back to Catha Prime. The timing seemed right to probe gently. You know, I've always wondered, how many colonies has Earth actually established? We only really hear about the official ones in the Centauri and Sirius systems. Emily's expression became guarded. Those are the only officially recognized Earth colonies. There were some failed attempts in the early days, before the Galactic Alliance formed, but nothing substantial. Failed attempts? What happened to them? The usual problems: resource limitations, environmental challenges, leadership disputes. Emily shrugged. Most of the colonists returned to Earth or were relocated to the successful settlements. Most, Blake pressed. Not all. Emily gave him a curious look. Blake, why this sudden interest in colonial history? First that strange planet name yesterday, now these questions. Before Blake could respond, the hall lights dimmed slightly, and Earth's Prime Minister approached the podium for the traditional Founders' Day address. Blake used the distraction to gather his thoughts, increasingly certain that there was more to the story of Earth's early colonization efforts than the official narrative suggested. The Prime Minister's speech was predictably pompous, celebrating humanity's achievements since joining the Galactic Alliance and the prosperity of Earth's official colonies. Blake found his attention wandering until one phrase caught his ear. We honor not only those who succeeded, but those who sacrificed in the early pioneering days, including the brave souls of Project Diaspora, whose contributions remain classified but never forgotten. Project Diaspora. The term triggered something in Blake's memory, a fragment of the information download he'd received from the ship. He was certain he'd heard or seen that designation during the neural interface connection. After the speech, as the celebration continued with music and dancing, Blake tried to appear engaged while his mind raced. The ship, the coordinates, Project Diaspora, the pieces were beginning to connect, forming a picture that both excited and alarmed him. Emily, he said suddenly, have you ever heard of Project Diaspora? Emily nearly choked on her drink. Where did you hear that name? She demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. The Prime Minister just mentioned it in his speech, Blake said, watching her reaction carefully. That's unusual, Emily said, composing herself. It's not a term that's generally spoken in public contexts. But you know what it is. Emily glanced around nervously. This isn't the place for this conversation, Blake. In fact, there really isn't a place for this conversation at all. That project is classified Level 5. Blake recognized the significance immediately. Level 5 was the highest security classification in Earth's government, reserved for information considered critical to planetary security. Emily, I think I've found something related to it, Blake said, deciding to trust her. Something important. She stared at him, conflict evident in her expression. Blake, if you've somehow accessed Level 5 information, you need to report it immediately. Failure to do so is a serious crime. I need to understand what I've found first, Blake insisted. Lives could depend on it. Emily's professional composure cracked slightly. Whose lives? What are you talking about? I can't explain here, Blake said. But I need your help. Just information, nothing that would compromise your position. Emily was silent for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. Tomorrow. My apartment. 9 p.m. And Blake, if this is something that could cause trouble, I need to know exactly what I'm getting involved with. Tomorrow, Blake agreed. Thank you. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of small talk and forced smiles. Blake was relieved when they finally left, the weight of his discovery and the questions it raised pressing heavily on his mind. He dropped Emily at her apartment with a promise to return the next evening, then headed back to his workshop, eager to spend more time with the ship and perhaps learn more about Project Diaspora before his meeting with Emily. As he turned onto the quiet industrial street where his workshop stood, Blake immediately sensed something was wrong. The security lights he always left on were dark, and the main door was slightly ajar. Pulling his ground car to a stop a block away, Blake approached cautiously on foot, wishing he owned some kind of weapon. The workshop had been thoroughly searched. Tools and parts lay scattered across the floor, cabinets stood open, and his computer terminal had been disassembled. But the real target was obvious: the The area where the ship had been parked was empty. The mysterious vessel was gone. Blake stood in stunned silence, surveying the damage. Who had taken the ship? Government agents? Corporate thieves? Aliens? His mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Then he remembered the data crystal, safely tucked into a hidden pocket in his jacket. At least that hadn't been taken. A soft noise from the back of the workshop alerted him that he wasn't alone. Blake grabbed a heavy wrench from the floor and moved cautiously toward his living quarters. The door was ajar, light spilling out into the darkened workshop. Peering around the doorframe, Blake was shocked to see a figure sitting calmly at his kitchen table. Director Harrington from Planetary Security, two armed guards standing at attention behind him. "Mr. Turner," Harrington said without looking up, "I believe we need to have a conversation about Project Diaspora, the ship you acquired, and exactly how much you know about Catha Prime." Blake gripped the wrench tighter. "You broke into my property and stole my ship." "That ship was never yours, Mr. Turner," Harrington said coldly. "It belongs to Earth government, and its existence is classified under interstellar security protocols." "I bought it legally," Blake argued. 5 credits at the spacecraft graveyard. "A regrettable oversight that has been addressed. The supervisor who sold it to you has been detained for questioning." Harrington gestured to a chair. "Please sit down. This will go much easier if you cooperate." Blake remained standing. "What's Project Diaspora? What's so special about that ship?" Harrington studied him for a moment. "What did you learn from the neural interface, Mr. Turner?" The question confirmed Blake's suspicion that Harrington knew exactly what the ship was and how it functioned. "I saw a planet called Catha Prime. I saw humans living there, and then something attacking them. And I got the distinct impression that Earth government has been hiding its existence." "Interesting," Harrington said. "What else?" "Coordinates," Blake admitted. "The exact location of Catha Prime." At this, Harrington's composed facade cracked slightly, a flash of intense interest crossing his face. "You have the precise coordinates? Where are they? Written down? Memorized?" "In my head," Blake tapped his temple, "along with everything else the ship showed me. So unless you plan to cut my brain open, you'll need to explain what's going on if you want that information." Harrington sighed. "Mr. Turner, you've stumbled into a situation of extreme sensitivity, involving not just Earth security, but potentially the stability of the entire Galactic Alliance. I'm authorized to offer you 2 options: full cooperation, including sharing all information you've obtained, in exchange for immunity from prosecution and a generous compensation package, or detention under the Interstellar Security Act, which would mean indefinite confinement without trial." Blake knew the second option was no option at all. The Interstellar Security Act had been implemented shortly after Earth joined the Galactic Alliance, granting sweeping powers to detain anyone deemed a potential threat to interstellar relations. "Before I decide," Blake said, "I want to know what Project Diaspora was, and why Catha Prime is such a secret." Harrington considered for a moment, then nodded. "Some context is reasonable. Project Diaspora was initiated in 2195, almost a century ago, before Earth had formal contact with the Galactic Alliance. It was a classified colonization program, sending pioneers to promising worlds beyond our solar system. Beyond the official colonies we hear about," Blake clarified. "Yes, while the Centauri and Sirius colonies were public knowledge, Project Diaspora established 12 additional colonies in secret, using experimental faster-than-light technology that was unstable but functional." "Why the secrecy?" "Initially, it was about securing humanity's future. Earth was overpopulated, resources were strained, and there was genuine fear that our species might not survive if confined to one solar system. The project leaders believed that by establishing multiple hidden colonies, humanity would endure even if Earth itself didn't." Blake frowned. "That doesn't explain why they're still secret, especially after we joined the Galactic Alliance and gained access to reliable FTL technology. When Earth was invited to join the Alliance, certain conditions were imposed," Harrington said carefully. "One was a strict limitation on human colonial expansion. The existing official colonies were grandfathered in, but no new ones would be permitted for at least 2 centuries. Why would Earth agree to that? Because the alternative was exclusion from the Alliance and potential isolation or conflict. Many species feared human expansion, our adaptability, our resourcefulness, our rapid technological advancement. The restriction was presented as a reasonable compromise. Blake was beginning to understand. So the diaspora colonies violated the treaty with the Alliance. Exactly. Their existence represents a significant breach of our accession agreement. If the Alliance discovered them, the consequences could range from severe sanctions to Earth's expulsion from the Alliance, or worse. What about the colonists? Are they still out there? Harrington's expression darkened. We lost contact with most of the diaspora colonies within 20 years of their establishment. The experimental FDL communications eventually failed, and without the resources to mount rescue missions, they were essentially abandoned. But Catha Prime was different. Different how? It thrived. Periodic coded transmissions reached Earth for nearly 50 years, reporting a flourishing colony that had grown to over 100,000 people. They had developed unique technologies adapted to their new world, including advanced bioengineering and quantum communication systems. The ship, Blake realized. It's from Catha Prime, isn't it? Built by the colonists. We believe so, Harrington nodded. Based on the technology you described, it matches what we know of their later developments. But the transmission stopped abruptly 42 years ago, after an urgent message warning of an approaching hostile force. I saw that in the vision, Blake said. Ships attacking the colony. Who were they? We don't know for certain. The final transmission was corrupted. Earth government sent a covert reconnaissance mission 10 years later, but they found no trace of the colony or any human presence on the planet. The official conclusion was that it had been destroyed. Blake absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with what the ship had shown him. And no one's been back since. The mission was costly and risky. With no signs of survivors and the continuing need to hide the colony's existence from the Alliance, there was no justification for further expeditions. But what if there were survivors? Blake pressed. What if some of them escaped or went into hiding? After 42 years? Unlikely. Harrington dismissed the idea. But the technology they developed, particularly their quantum communication system and bioengineered adaptations, would be invaluable. If the ship contains data on those technologies, it could advance Earth's position within the Alliance significantly. Blake thought of the data crystal in his pocket, but said nothing about it. And the coordinates I received? What would you do with those? Verify them against our historical records and potentially mount a covert salvage operation to recover any remaining technology, Harrington said. Though I doubt after all this time there's much left to find. Blake wasn't convinced. The urgency of the vision he'd experienced through the neural interface had felt like more than just a historical record. It had felt like a message, a call for help. What if I cooperate? What happens to me afterward? You'll be well compensated and allowed to return to your business, subject to a non-disclosure agreement. Your expertise might even be valuable to the recovery operation, should we proceed with one. Blake made his decision. I'll need to see the ship again to show you the exact coordinates. The neural interface mapped them in a way I can't easily translate to standard navigation systems. Harrington looked skeptical but nodded. The ship has been moved to a secure facility. I can arrange access tomorrow morning. I'll meet you there, Blake agreed. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to clean up my workshop. After Harrington and his guards left, promising to send the facility's location to Blake's communications terminal, Blake surveyed the damage to his workshop with a heavy heart. Years of collected tools and parts were scattered everywhere. It would take days to reorganize everything. But his mind wasn't on the cleanup. It was on what he had learned and what he hadn't told Harrington, specifically about the data crystal that still rested in his pocket. The director had mentioned quantum communication technology as one of Catha Prime's most valuable developments. If the crystal was indeed a quantum communications device, it might be capable of far more than just data storage. Blake retrieved a small scanner from a drawer that had been emptied onto the floor. It was a simple device used to detect energy emissions from various power sources. Placing the crystal on his workbench, he ran the scanner over it. The readings confirmed what Nathan had suggested, quantum-level energy fluctuations that defied standard classification. But there was something else, something Nathan hadn't mentioned. The energy pattern was actively changing, not randomly, but in what appeared to be a deliberate sequence. It's not just storing data, Blake murmured. It's receiving it. Right now. The implications were staggering. If the crystal was receiving data through quantum entanglement, as Nathan had theorized, then somewhere, perhaps even as far away as Katha Prime, there had to be a paired device sending that data. And that meant someone was alive to operate it. Blake needed more information before his meeting with Harrington, and there was only one person he trusted who might be able to help. Despite the late hour, he sent an urgent message to Emily, asking to move their meeting to first thing in the morning rather than the evening as originally planned. Her reply came quickly, 7 a.m. Sunburst Cafe, 2 blocks from my apartment. Come alone and be careful. Blake spent a restless night attempting to clean his workshop while his mind raced with questions. By dawn, he had made little progress with the cleanup but had reached a decision about what to do. The Sunburst Cafe was quiet at that early hour, just a few early risers nursing cups of coffee. Emily was already there, occupying a corner booth that offered privacy from other patrons. She looked tired, her usual professional composure strained. "This better be important, Blake," she said as he slid into the seat across from her. "I've been up all night thinking about this." "It's important," Blake confirmed, glancing around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "I know about Project Diaspora now. Harrington came to my workshop last night. They took the ship." Emily's eyes widened. "Director Harrington himself? Blake, do you understand how serious this is?" "I'm starting to," Blake said grimly. "He told me about the diaspora colonies, about Katha Prime and the treaty violations. But I need to know if he told me the truth." "I don't know all the details," Emily admitted. "My clearance gives me access to the fact that Project Diaspora existed and that contact was lost with the colonies, but not much more. Most of the original records were purged from the main government databases decades ago. Harrington says they're planning a salvage operation to recover technology from Katha Prime, assuming nothing and no one is still alive there after 42 years. Does that sound right to you?" Emily frowned. "It doesn't match what I've heard. There have been rumors in the department about renewed interest in the diaspora sites, but not for salvage. The talk is about containment." "Containment? Of what?" "I don't know," Emily said, clearly uncomfortable. "But about 6 months ago, there was a security breach involving archived diaspora files. A week later, an emergency protocol was enacted, placing all remaining diaspora information under Level 5 restriction. Then the rumors started, something about signals being detected, possible survivals, containment priorities." Blake's pulse quickened. So there might be survivors after all. And Earth government might not be interested in rescuing them. "I can't confirm that," Emily cautioned. "But I know Director Harrington's operational priorities have always leaned towards security and containment rather than humanitarian concerns. If there's a potential threat to the Earth Alliance relationship, his instinct would be to eliminate it." Blake carefully removed the data crystal from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. "I didn't tell Harrington about this. It was inside the ship. I think it's a quantum communication device, still actively receiving data." Emily stared at the crystal, her expression a mixture of fascination and fear. "Blake, if that's what you think it is, and if Harrington finds out you have it." "I know," Blake said grimly. "But I need to understand what it contains before I decide what to do with it. And I need your help." "My help? How?" "I'm not a technical expert. But you have access to government facilities, including secure communication systems. If this crystal contains data in a format similar to Earth government protocols, those systems might be able to decode it." Emily shook her head emphatically. "That's insane. Using government systems to decode classified alien technology? I'd lose my job at minimum. More likely, I'd end up in detention right alongside you." "Emily, I think people are alive on Katha Prime. People who've been abandoned by Earth for over 40 years. And I think they're in danger, again." If Harrington's priority is containment rather than rescue. You don't know that, Emily argued, but with less conviction. No, I don't know for sure, Blake acknowledged. But I intend to find out, with or without your help. Emily was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with her choices. Finally, she sighed. What exactly do you need? Access to a secure terminal with quantum decryption capabilities. Just long enough to attempt to read the data on this crystal. And if we succeed, what then? Blake met her gaze steadily. Then we make a decision based on what we learn. If there are survivors needing rescue, I want to help them. If it's just valuable technology, I'll turn it over to Harrington as agreed. Emily took a deep breath. There's a secondary access point to the department's quantum communications array in the basement level of the administration building. It's used for maintenance and rarely monitored. I could get us in for maybe 30 minutes before anyone noticed. Now, while most of the staff are still arriving for the day, we'll have the best chance of avoiding attention. Emily stood, her decision made. But Blake, if this goes wrong, I'll take full responsibility, he promised. I'll say I coerced you if it comes to that. She gave him a wry smile. Noble, but unlikely to be believed. Let's go before I change my mind. The Planetary Administration building was already bustling with early morning activity as they entered through a side entrance. Emily used her credentials to access a service elevator that took them to a sublevel 3 floors below ground. The corridor they emerged into was utilitarian and deserted, a stark contrast to the elegant public areas above. This way, Emily said, leading him to a nondescript door marked only with a maintenance code. She swiped her badge and entered a lengthy security code, and the door slid open to reveal a small room filled with technical equipment. The maintenance access for the quantum array, she explained, moving to a terminal. It's designed for diagnostic work on the communication systems that connect Earth to its official colonies and Alliance headquarters. Blake placed the crystal on the console beside the terminal. Can this system interface with it? Emily studied the crystal. Not directly. We'll need an adapter. She opened a cabinet containing various connection devices and selected one. This is designed for non-standard quantum devices. It might work. Working quickly, Emily connected the adapter to the terminal and carefully placed the crystal in the receptacle. The crystal's inner light pulsed more rapidly as it made contact with the system. It's responding, Emily said, surprised. That shouldn't happen with truly alien technology. This suggests compatibility with Earth systems. Blake nodded. If it was built by human colonists using adapted technology, that would make sense. Emily's fingers flew over the controls, initiating a sequence of diagnostic protocols. I'm trying to establish a basic read protocol without triggering any security alerts. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then suddenly, the terminal screen flickered and began displaying data, not in standard text, but in a complex array of symbols and images that shifted and changed even as they watched. It's encrypted, Emily said, but not with any standard Earth government cipher. Can you break it? Not easily, and not quickly, but I can try a general pattern recognition protocol, see if the system can identify any consistent elements. As Emily worked, Blake kept an anxious eye on the door, expecting Harrington or security officers to burst in at any moment. The minutes ticked by slowly. Wait, I'm getting something, Emily said suddenly. The scattered symbols on the screen began to coalesce into a more coherent pattern. The system is identifying a communication protocol that has similarities to early diaspora encryption methods. It's attempting to adapt. The screen flickered again, and suddenly clear text appeared. Signal confirmed. Identity verification. Human genetic markers detected. Proceeding with message transmission. Blake and Emily exchanged startled glances. It's responding to your presence, Emily whispered. It must have some kind of biosensor. More text appeared. This is a priority distress signal from the Katha Prime remnant. Our position has been compromised. Hostile forces have located our hidden settlement. Estimates indicate less than one standard Earth month before our defenses fail. 7,823 human survivors require immediate evacuation. Previous attempts at communication have failed. This messenger vessel was our final option. Attached, current coordinates, defense situation, hostile force identification, and all accumulated data on Catha Prime technology for negotiation purposes. If Earth will not assist, we request forwarding of this message to any sympathetic alliance species. We will trade all technological developments for rescue. Authentication code, Diaspora, KP 7729, Epsilon, Prime. Blake's heart raced. They're still alive. Over 7,000 of them. And they're under attack again. Emily stared at the screen in shock. The date stamp on this message. Blake, it was sent less than 2 months ago. The ship must have been drifting, damaged, before it was recovered and sent to the graveyard. And Harrington probably knows this already, Blake realized. That's why there's a new containment protocol. They're not planning a rescue. They're planning to ensure no one ever finds out about Catha Prime, to protect the treaty with the Alliance. We don't know that for certain, Emily cautioned, but her voice lacked conviction. We need to download this data, Blake said urgently. All of it. I can't just copy classified information of this level, Emily protested. These people will die without help, Blake insisted. Over 7,000 human beings who've been surviving on their own for generations. We can't abandon them again. Emily hesitated, then nodded. There's a portable quantum storage drive in the equipment locker. It should be compatible. While Emily retrieved the drive, Blake studied the rest of the message data appearing on the screen. There were detailed technical specifications for the ship he'd found, confirming his suspicions about its neural interface and advanced propulsion system. There were also star charts showing the exact location of Catha Prime, along with approach vectors designed to avoid detection by the hostile forces surrounding the planet. Most disturbing were the images of the attackers, massive, hive-like spacecraft belonging to a species identified as the Scourge, a nomadic predatory civilization that operated outside Alliance jurisdiction, systematically harvesting resources and technology from vulnerable worlds. The Scourge, Blake murmured. I've heard traders mention them at the spaceport. The Alliance officially denies their existence, calls them a spacer myth. They're real enough to these colonists, Emily said, connecting the quantum drive to the terminal. Initiating download now. The transfer took several minutes, during which Blake kept expecting alarms to sound. But the maintenance room remained quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the equipment. Download complete, Emily announced, disconnecting the drive and handing it to Blake. Now we need to get out of here before someone notices unauthorized access to the system. As they were preparing to leave, a final message appeared on the terminal. Neural key activation detected. Failsafe protocol initiated. Vessel recall sequence active. Coordinates locked. Blake frowned. What does that mean? I don't know, Emily said, looking concerned. But we need to go. Now. They carefully disconnected the crystal, returning it to Blake's pocket, and left the maintenance room as they had found it. The sublevel corridors were still deserted as they made their way back to the service elevator. What are you going to do with this information? Emily asked as they ascended. I don't know yet, Blake admitted. But I can't just turn it over to Harrington, not if his plan is to abandon these people to protect a treaty. Blake, even if you wanted to help them, what could you possibly do? You're one person, without resources or authority. The ship, Blake said suddenly. The recall sequence. What if the ship can return to Catha Prime on its own? What if that's what the message meant? Even if that's true, Harrington has the ship secured in a government facility. You can't just walk in and take it. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped out into a side corridor of the main building. Blake checked the time. His meeting with Harrington at the secure facility was in less than an hour. I need to think, Blake said. But first, I need to keep my appointment with Harrington. If I don't show up, he'll know something's wrong. Emily looked troubled. Blake, be careful. If Harrington suspects you know more than you're telling him. I know. Thank you for your help, Emily. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. Just don't do anything stupid, she warned. And Blake? Those people deserve a chance. I hope you find a way to help them." They parted outside the building, Emily returning to her department while Blake headed toward the location Harrington had sent, a nondescript government research facility on the outskirts of New Phoenix, opposite from Blake's workshop. As he drove, Blake's mind raced with possibilities. The quantum drive in his pocket contained not just the distress message but detailed technical specifications for the ship, including its neural interface system. If he could understand those specifications before meeting Harrington, he might find a way to regain control of the vessel. He pulled over at a quiet roadside park and connected the quantum drive to his portable terminal. Most of the technical data was beyond his understanding, but the sections on the neural interface were relatively straightforward. The system was designed to respond specifically to human brainwave patterns, a security measure to prevent alien species from piloting the vessel. More importantly, Blake discovered that the neural link established during his first connection had created a persistent bond between him and the ship. The failsafe protocol mentioned in the final message appeared to be a security feature. If the ship detected that its paired pilot was still alive but separated from the vessel, it would initiate a self-retrieval sequence. "It's coming to find me," Blake realized with a mixture of awe and alarm. If the ship broke out of Harrington's secure facility, the response would be immediate and overwhelming. He needed to be ready. Blake arrived at the research facility exactly on time. It was a low, sprawling complex surrounded by a high-security fence and multiple checkpoints. Harrington was waiting at the main entrance, accompanied by two security officers. "Mr. Turner," the director greeted him with a tight smile. "Thank you for your punctuality. The ship is in our primary research bay. If you'll follow me." Blake was escorted through a series of security checkpoints, each requiring Harrington's personal authorization. The facility was clearly a high-security installation, with armed guards at regular intervals and surveillance systems covering every approach. Finally, they reached a massive hangar-like space where the copper-colored ship sat surrounded by scanning equipment and research stations. A team of technicians in lab coats moved around it, taking readings and attempting to access its systems. "As you can see, we've begun preliminary analysis," Harrington said. "But without the neural interface data you experienced, we're making limited progress. The ship resists conventional scanning methods." Blake approached the vessel, feeling a subtle resonance as he drew near, as if the ship recognized his presence. "Your technicians haven't been able to enter it." "No. The hatch hasn't responded to any attempt to open it. We were considering more invasive methods, but I'd prefer not to damage such valuable technology." "I can open it," Blake said confidently, "and I can show you the coordinates from the neural interface. But I want assurances about what happens next." Harrington's expression hardened slightly. "What sort of assurances?" "If there are survivors on Catha Prime, they deserve rescue, not abandonment for political convenience." A flash of surprise crossed Harrington's face before his controlled expression returned. "An interesting hypothesis, Mr. Turner. What makes you think there might be survivors after 42 years? Blake chose his words carefully, not revealing his knowledge of the distress message. "The ship showed me images of the colony under attack, but also of people escaping, hiding. It seemed recent, not historical. The neural interface likely created a vivid simulation based on historical data," Harrington dismissed. "Our reconnaissance mission found no evidence of survivors." 10 years after the attack, Blake pointed out. "They could have been in hiding, rebuilding. Humans are resourceful." "Indeed they are," Harrington agreed. "Which is precisely why any theoretical survivors would represent a potential security risk to Earth's treaty obligations. But this is all academic speculation. Now, about those coordinates." Blake realized Harrington had no intention of considering a rescue operation, regardless of evidence. His priority was clearly containment of both the technology and the knowledge of Catha Prime's existence. Moving closer to the ship, Blake placed his hand on the hull near where the hatch had opened before. As expected, the material warmed beneath his touch, and a line of blue light traced the outline of the entry point. "It recognizes you," Harrington observed with interest. "Fascinating. The hatch slid open smoothly. Blake turned to Harrington. I need to access the neural interface to show you the coordinates. They're not stored in a conventional format. Harrington nodded. Proceed. But my team will monitor all activity. Blake climbed into the ship, feeling a sense of familiarity as he settled into the pilot's seat. The neural interface helmet hung above, just as before. He could feel the ship responding to his presence, systems activating subtly around him. Harrington stood at the entrance to the cockpit, watching closely as Blake reached for the helmet. This will take a few minutes, Blake said. The interface needs to sync with my neural patterns. As Blake placed the helmet on his head, he concentrated not on the coordinates, but on the recall protocol he'd read about in the technical specifications. Immediately, he felt the ship's consciousness connecting with his own, recognizing him as its designated pilot. Activate emergency departure protocol, Blake thought clearly. Override all external restraints. Set course for Catha Prime. The response was immediate. The ship's systems surged to full power, lights flashing throughout the cockpit. The hatch slammed closed, nearly catching Harrington, who jumped back just in time. Turner, what are you doing? Harrington's muffled shout came through the hull as alarms began to sound throughout the facility. Blake felt the ship breaking its connections to the scanning equipment attached to its exterior. Through the neural link, he could sense the vessel's autonomous systems calculating the optimal escape route and preparing the propulsion system for activation. I'm sorry, Director, Blake murmured, though he knew Harrington couldn't hear him. But these people deserve a chance. The ship lifted smoothly from the hangar floor, hovering for a moment as its defensive systems activated, creating a shimmering energy field around the hull. Through the small viewports, Blake could see security personnel rushing into the hangar, some raising weapons. Initiate non-lethal deterrent, Blake thought, not wanting to harm anyone. The ship pulsed once, emitting a wave of energy that swept through the hangar. Every electronic device, including weapons and communication systems, went dead instantly. In the momentary confusion, the ship shot upward, crashing through the hangar roof with precision that minimized debris fallout on the people below. Within seconds, they were climbing through New Phoenix's airspace, accelerating rapidly. Blake expected pursuit. Earth Defense Forces would surely scramble interceptors, but the ship was moving with astonishing speed, breaking through the atmosphere into orbit in less than 2 minutes. Show me our course, Blake thought. A three-dimensional star map appeared in his mind, showing Earth and a trajectory leading to a star system Blake didn't recognize, presumably where Catha Prime orbited. The estimated travel time appeared, 17 days. 17 days? Blake said aloud, surprised. Even the fastest Alliance ships would take months to reach a system that distant. Through the neural link, the ship's intelligence explained. Its propulsion system utilized principles of space-time manipulation far beyond current Alliance technology, allowing it to create localized wormhole-like corridors for rapid transit. The ship had been designed specifically for long-range, high-speed missions between Earth and Catha Prime. As the ship prepared to activate its main drive, Blake had a moment of doubt. He was leaving everything behind. His workshop, his life on Earth, perhaps even his freedom if he ever returned. And he was heading into unknown danger to help people he'd never met, based on information he couldn't fully verify. It's the right thing to do, he told himself firmly. Emily's face came to mind. She would understand, even if she thought him foolish. He hoped Harrington wouldn't take his frustration out on her. The drive activated with a subtle vibration, and the stars outside the viewport distorted as the ship created its transit corridor. Earth vanished behind them as they entered what the ship's consciousness termed shift space, a dimensional state that allowed for the effective bypassing of normal space-time constraints. During the journey, Blake spent hours each day connected to the neural interface, learning everything he could about Catha Prime and its people. The ship's database was extensive, containing not just technical information, but cultural and historical records of the colony's development. He learned that Catha Prime had been the most successful of the diaspora colonies, blessed with a habitable environment and abundant resources. The colonists had thrived, developing a society that blended advanced technology with a deep respect for their new world's ecology. Their isolation from Earth had forced them to innovate, leading to breakthroughs in biotechnology, quantum physics, and neural-machine interfaces that surpassed anything in the Alliance. But their prosperity had eventually attracted the Scourge, a species that existed by appropriating the technologies and resources of others. The first attack 42 years ago had devastated the main colony, forcing the survivors underground and into remote wilderness regions. They had been rebuilding slowly, developing defensive technologies and keeping their presence hidden, until recently when a Scourge deep scanning mission had detected their primary hidden settlement. The distress message had been a last resort after years of failed attempts to re-establish contact with Earth. The ship Blake had found was one of 3 sent out with identical messages. The fate of the other 2 was unknown. As they neared Catha Prime, Blake prepared himself for what might await. The ship's database included information on the colony's defensive capabilities, but they had been designed to delay rather than defeat a determined Scourge assault. Tom was critical. On the 17th day, the ship emerged from shift space into the Catha system. The planet was immediately visible, a beautiful blue-green world orbiting a yellow sun, much as Blake had seen in his first vision. But surrounding the planet were dozens of massive, irregular spacecraft, the Scourge fleet, preparing for their final assault on the hidden colony. Stealth protocol activated. The ship communicated as it detected the hostile vessels. Its external appearance shifted, adaptive materials rendering it nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. It altered course to approach the planet from its night side, away from the main concentration of Scourge vessels. As they entered the upper atmosphere, Blake could see evidence of the original attack 4 decades earlier. Vast swathes of what had once been farmland and forests reduced to barren plains, the ruins of cities visible as ghostly outlines in the moonlight. But there were also signs of recovery, areas where vegetation had reclaimed the destruction, and faint energy signatures that suggested hidden settlements. The ship homed in on a specific mountain range, following a narrow valley to what appeared to be a solid rock face. As they approached, a section of the cliff shimmered and disappeared, a holographic concealment hiding a massive hangar entrance. "We're being scanned," the ship informed Blake, transmitting authentication codes. There was a tense moment of waiting, then a response. The hangar doors were opening, revealing a cavernous space carved into the mountain itself. The ship landed smoothly on a designated pad, surrounded immediately by what appeared to be armed defense personnel in uniforms unlike any Blake had seen, a blend of military precision and adaptive environmental technology. Blake disconnected from the neural interface, took a deep breath, and opened the hatch. As he stepped out, he was met by a dozen guards with weapons trained on him, and behind them, a tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair and an unmistakable air of authority. "Identify yourself and explain how you came to pilot a messenger vessel," she commanded, her accent slightly different from any Earth dialect Blake had heard. "My name is Blake Turner. I'm a mechanic from Earth," he said, raising his hand slowly. "I found your ship in a salvage yard. I received your message about the Scourge attack and came to help." The woman's expression showed surprise and disbelief. "Earth sent one man? In a single vessel?" "Earth didn't send me," Blake admitted. "Earth government wanted to suppress your message, to protect their treaty with the Galactic Alliance. I borrowed the ship and came on my own." A murmur ran through the assembled guards. The woman studied Blake intently, then made a quick gesture. The guards lowered their weapons. "I am Director Nora Briggs, leader of the Catha Prime Defense Council," she introduced herself. "And you, Blake Turner, have either doomed us or saved us by coming here. Time will tell which." Over the next few hours, Blake shared everything he knew about the situation on Earth, the Alliance treaty restrictions, and Harrington's containment priorities. In return, Director Briggs explained the desperate situation on Catha Prime. The Scourge had surrounded the planet and were systematically eliminating the colonists' defensive measures. Within days, they would locate and breach the main settlement where over 6,000 survivors had gathered. The remaining colonists were scattered in smaller outposts, equally vulnerable once the main defenses fell. Our only advantage has been our technology, Briggs explained as she led Blake through the vast underground complex. We've advanced well beyond Alliance standards in several fields, particularly biomechanical integration and quantum physics. But the Scourge outnumber and outgun us. Without evacuation, we face extinction. What about your ships? Blake asked. The messenger vessel I came in is fast, but too small for large-scale evacuation. We have transport vessels capable of carrying hundreds, but they lack the specialized drive technology of the messengers. They wouldn't escape the Scourge blockade. Briggs stopped at a view screen showing the massive enemy ships in orbit. We need a solution that either defeats the Scourge or makes us invisible to them long enough to evacuate. Blake thought about the technical data he'd studied during the journey. The messenger's shift drive creates a dimensional corridor that effectively makes the ship undetectable while in transit. Could that technology be adapted to your larger vessels? Briggs looked at him with new interest. Possibly. Our engineers have been working on scaling up the shift drive technology, but haven't completed the theoretical framework. If you brought the complete technical specifications. I did, Blake confirmed. Everything was in the ship's database. But even if we can adapt the technology, 17 days isn't much of a head start from Earth. If Harrington sends pursuit, we'd still need somewhere to go, Briggs finished his thought. Somewhere outside Alliance space where Earth couldn't find us or the Scourge follow. An idea formed in Blake's mind. What if we could secure Alliance protection instead? Turn a liability into an advantage. The treaty explicitly forbids our existence, Briggs reminded him. How would revealing ourselves to the Alliance help? The treaty forbids Earth from establishing unauthorized colonies, Blake clarified. But after 4 generations, are you really an Earth colony anymore? You've developed your own culture, your own technology, your own identity. You could petition for recognition as an independent human civilization, seeking Alliance membership on your own terms. Briggs considered this. The Alliance Council might be sympathetic, especially if presented with evidence of Earth's abandonment of our people and the threat posed by the Scourge. But we'd need to survive long enough to make such a petition. And we'd need proof, Blake added. Documentation of your history, your development independent from Earth, and evidence of Earth's knowledge and deliberate abandonment of your people. We have the records, Briggs assured him. Decades of meticulous documentation, preserved through every hardship. Our founders believed someday we would need to prove our legitimacy. Then we need to get that documentation and as many of your people as possible to Alliance space, Blake said. And to do that, we need to adapt the shift drive technology to your transport ships as quickly as possible. For the next 3 days, Blake worked alongside Catha Prime's engineering team, sharing everything he knew about the messenger vessel systems. His practical mechanical knowledge complemented their theoretical expertise, creating a synergy that accelerated their progress dramatically. Meanwhile, the Scourge continued their methodical assault on the planet's defenses. 3 smaller outposts fell, though most residents had already been evacuated to the main settlement. The perimeter sensors indicated the Scourge were narrowing their search grid, closing in on their location. On the 4th day, a breakthrough came. The engineering team successfully tested a prototype shift drive adapted for one of the colony's medium transport vessels. The test was limited, a jump of only a few thousand miles, but it proved the concept was viable. We can scale this up to the main transports, the lead engineer, a brilliant young woman named Maya Foster, explained during the briefing. But we'll need at least 5 more days to manufacture and install the drives on all 6 transports. That's cutting it close, Briggs said grimly. The outer defense perimeter will fail within 7 days based on current Scourge progress. We need a distraction, Blake suggested. Something to delay their advance or divert their attention while we complete the preparations. The military commander, a veteran named Aaron Blake who had been born on Catha Prime and trained since childhood to defend the colony, offered a solution. We've been developing a resonance disruptor designed to interfere with Scourge neural networks. It's not powerful enough to disable their fleet, but it could create confusion if deployed strategically. How many do you have? Blake asked. 3 functioning prototypes. They're short-range and would need to be positioned near key Scourge advance units. A suicide mission, Briggs said flatly. Not necessarily, Blake countered. The messenger vessel has advanced stealth capabilities. I could deploy the disruptors without being detected. You've done enough already, Briggs argued. This isn't your fight. I made it my fight when I stole the ship and came here, Blake said with determination. Let me do this. Your engineers are more valuable working on the transport drives. After intense debate, the plan was approved. Blake would take the messenger vessel and deploy the resonance disruptors at 3 critical points in the Scourge advance, creating a disruption that would hopefully buy the colony the time it needed to complete the evacuation preparations. The mission was set for the following night. As Blake prepared, Director Briggs approached him privately. Why did you really come? She asked. You risked everything for people you'd never met, with no guarantee we even existed. Blake considered the question. When I connected with the ship, I saw what happened here. I felt the courage and determination of your people. I couldn't just turn my back on that, couldn't let politics and treaties condemn thousands to death. Earth abandoned us once, Briggs said softly. Yet here you are, an Earthman, risking your life to save us. Maybe I'm making up for what my world did to yours, Blake suggested. Or maybe I just believe people deserve a chance, no matter where they're from. Briggs smiled. When this is over, if we survive, there will be a place for you here. Catha Prime could use more mechanics with your initiative. Blake nodded, surprisingly moved by the offer. Let's make sure there's still a Catha Prime first. The mission began under cover of darkness. Blake piloted the messenger vessel out through the concealed hangar entrance, activating its stealth systems immediately. The Scourge had numerous scout ships patrolling the area, but the vessel's adaptive camouflage rendered it virtually invisible to their sensors. Following the coordinates provided by Commander Blake, he approached the first target, a Scourge forward command unit directing excavation operations near one of the colony's abandoned outposts. Landing briefly in a sheltered ravine, Blake deployed the first resonance disruptor, activating its timer before quickly returning to the ship. The second deployment went equally smoothly. A quick landing near a Scourge sensor array, placement of the disruptor, and a clean getaway before any alarm could be raised. It was at the third site that things went wrong. As Blake was placing the final disruptor near a major Scourge ground force, a patrol rounded the ridge unexpectedly. Blake caught only a glimpse of the aliens, tall, insectoid figures in articulated exoskeletons, before they spotted him and raised an alarm. Blake ran for the ship, the disruptor clutched tightly in his arms. Energy weapons fire erupted around him, scorching the ground at his feet. He reached the vessel just as the Scourge patrol called in reinforcements, their strange, clicking language echoing through the night. The ship responded to his urgency, the hatch opening and closing with unprecedented speed as he tumbled inside. As he strapped into the pilot's seat and connected to the neural interface, Blake could see Scourge assault craft converging on his position. Evasive action, Blake commanded, and the ship shot upward, weaving through a barrage of energy blasts. 2 Scourge interceptors gave chase, faster than Blake had anticipated. He needed to deploy the final disruptor, but at this rate, he wouldn't survive long enough to do so. An idea formed in his mind. Ship, is the resonance disruptor compatible with your systems? The ship's consciousness analyzed the device and confirmed the quantum frequency principles were similar enough for integration. Connect the disruptor to your energy matrix and amplify its effect. It was a desperate gambit, potentially risking the ship's systems, but Blake saw no alternative. As the ship executed evasive maneuvers, mechanical manipulators extended from the cockpit wall, taking the disruptor and connecting it to the vessel's power core. The effect was immediate and far greater than Blake had hoped. The amplified resonance wave pulsed outward in an expanding sphere, catching not just the pursuing interceptors, but dozens of Scourge craft across a vast area. The alien vessels faltered, their coordinated movements dissolving into chaos as the disruption interfered with their neural networks. Blake seized the opportunity, piloting the ship back toward the colony's hidden base at maximum speed. Behind him, the Scourge forces were in disarray, communications disrupted, and command structures temporarily disabled. He landed to a hero's welcome. The amplified disruptor had affected far more of the Scourge forces than anyone had anticipated, buying the colony precious additional time. The engineering team reported accelerated progress on the transport drives, with the first 2 vessels already fitted and ready for testing. For the next 4 days, the colony worked around the clock, preparing for evacuation. The resonance disruption had thrown the Scourge advance into temporary chaos, but their forces were gradually reorganizing, adapting to counter the effect. Scouts reported a renewed, more cautious approach toward the colony's location. On the 5th day, Director Briggs called a final briefing. The engineering team had successfully equipped all 6 transport vessels with modified shift drives. The entire remaining population, 7,421 survivors, could be evacuated in a single coordinated departure. Our destination will be the Free Haven system, Briggs announced. It lies just beyond Alliance space, but maintains diplomatic relations with several Alliance members. We've made covert contact with their government, who have agreed to grant us temporary asylum while we petition the Alliance Council for recognition. What about the Scourge? Commander Blake asked. They'll pursue once they realize we've escaped. The shift drives will give us a significant head start, Maya Foster explained. And we're implementing a cascade overload in our geothermal power plant to trigger once we're clear. The resulting explosion should destroy much of their ground forces and create enough disruption for our ships to break orbit undetected. Director Briggs turned to Blake. We've prepared the messenger vessel to lead our convoy. Its navigation systems are more advanced, and your experience with the shift drive will be valuable. Will you guide us to Free Haven? Blake nodded without hesitation. It would be my honor. The evacuation began at dawn the following day. In disciplined groups, the colonists boarded the 6 massive transport ships, bringing with them only essential supplies and irreplaceable cultural artifacts. 4 generations of life on Catha Prime were being left behind. Homes, farms, workshops abandoned to the approaching enemy. Blake watched from the messenger vessel as the loading proceeded with remarkable efficiency. These people had lived under the threat of extinction for decades. They had prepared for this day, however much they had hoped it would never come. By mid-afternoon, the boarding was complete. Director Briggs was the last to enter the lead transport, pausing briefly to look back at the underground city that had sheltered her people for so long. Then she straightened her shoulders and strode up the ramp, every inch the leader her people needed. Blake received confirmation from all 6 transports, systems nominal, shift drives online, passengers secure. The geothermal overload was set with a 30-minute countdown, giving them just enough time to reach a safe distance before detonation. Initiate departure sequence, Blake commanded through the neural interface. The messenger vessel lifted smoothly from the landing pad, followed in precise formation by the 6 transports. They emerged from the hidden hangar into clear afternoon sunlight, accelerating immediately to breach the atmosphere before the Scourge could respond. Alarms sounded as they were detected, but the Scourge forces were still scattered and disorganized from the resonance disruption. By the time the alien fleet began to mobilize, the 7 ships were already entering the upper atmosphere, pushing their conventional drives to maximum as they prepared to activate their shift drives. 3 Scourge battlecruisers managed to intercept their trajectory, opening fire with devastating energy weapons. The rearmost transport took a glancing hit, but its shields held. Blake watched the countdown. 10 seconds until they could safely activate the shift drives outside Catha Prime's gravitational interference. All ships, prepare for shift. Blake transmitted as the final seconds ticked away. In perfect synchronization, the 7 vessels activated their drives. Space folded around them, the stars blurring as they slipped into shift space just as the pursuing Scourge ships launched another barrage. Behind them, The geothermal overload detonated with spectacular force, consuming the Scourge ground forces and disabling the nearest pursuers. The journey to Freehaven took 12 days, 12 days of anxiety, planning, and gradually building hope. Upon arrival, the Catha Prime refugees received the asylum they'd been promised. Their advanced technology, especially in biotechnology and quantum physics, made them valuable allies rather than burdens. 6 months later, Blake stood beside Director Briggs in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Alliance Council as the formal recognition of Catha Prime as an independent human civilization came to a vote. The evidence they presented of Earth's abandonment and the colonists' four-generation struggle for survival had swayed even the most skeptical council members. The vote was unanimous. Catha Prime would be granted full Alliance membership, with special protections against both Earth interference and Scourge aggression. The knowledge of their existence and Earth's treaty violation became public, forcing reforms in Earth's colonial policies and opening a new chapter in human interstellar relations. "What will you do now?" Briggs asked as they left the council chamber. Blake smiled. "You offered me a place on Catha Prime. Is that still open?" "Always," she replied warmly. "We need good mechanics with a talent for seeing value where others don't." 1 year later, Blake's workshop on New Catha Prime was thriving, specializing in adapting the colonists' advanced technology for practical applications throughout Alliance space. The coordinates he'd once carried in his mind had led not just to a lost colony, but to a new home, new purpose, and a future brighter than he could have imagined when he spent his last 5 credits on a mysterious alien ship. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments. Whether positive or negative, your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.